Chiefs and the Bills. That's the next game that we're going to touch on here. The Buffalo Bills defending home field against their rival in the AFC, and the Chiefs winning this game 28-21. The top 5 graded players that we had for the Buffalo Bills in this one: tight end Dalton Kincaid at the top of the list with 91.6. Cornerback Maxwell Harrison, man, they love seeing this. A 91.9, getting him back after missing most of the early part of the year with injury. Certainly has been a welcome addition to a group that was really struggling for them. Edge rusher Greg Rousseau, a 91.3. Safety Cole Bishop, felt like he was all over the field last night with a 79.1. And then tight end Dawson Knox, a 79.0. Josh Allen in this game, an 83.1. And then on Kansas City's side of things, their linebacker Nick Bolton equally felt like he was all over the place with a 91.0. Wide receiver Marquise Brown with an 80.4. Offensive guard Kingsley Suamataia with a 75.5. Center Creed Humphrey, a 73.8. And Rashee Rice rounded things out in the top 5 for him with a 72.6. Patrick Mahomes in this game, a 58.7 overall PFF grade. Stat that told the story, Dalton.
So the Bills, as we know now, are a ball control offense, right? They don't have that number 1 top flight receiver, and they're not just going to air it out all the time like some other teams can. And this was how they had to win this football game, is winning at the line of scrimmage, controlling the pace with the run game, winning time of possession, and just in general, limiting the opportunities for Patrick Mahomes to be Patrick Mahomes, right? The Bills out rushing the Chiefs 141-79 was big. They had the ball for almost 35 minutes. They only had one run play the entire night that lost yardage. That's the Bills' blueprint. We've talked about in other games that when they've looked at their best, especially last week, say against Carolina, they have run the football really well and then gotten in the play-action game, used those tight ends like Dalton Kincaid with the 100-yard day in this game. I think it all kind of racked up, and I thought Joe Brady called an outstanding game. It starts with the run game, and one thing the Bills had to do was control the Chiefs' personnel with their own. We talk about so much how good the Bills are with maybe an extra offensive lineman or multiple, two, three tight ends out there, a fullback and Quentin Morris out there, right? They got to dictate. They got in a rhythm of dictating who the Chiefs had on the field at any given time. So basically, they were in 11 personnel a lot in this game with Kincaid or Knox or even Jackson Hawes as the one tight end. But when you look at the way they condensed formations and used Khalil Shakir and even a Terrell Shavers in as run blockers, this offense in this game was run a lot like the Rams do it, say with Puka Nacua or a Jordan Whittington inserting into the box. But because they were in 11 and those guys are wide receivers, so often the Bills were running into looks where the Chiefs were in nickel and it was not Leo Chenal out there. That's really the guy more than anyone they were trying to avoid, because you could argue he's their most consistent run defender, but he's only out there in base with Bolton and Tranquil. When you get nickel, now you've got Trent McDuffie in the box in the nickel instead of Leo Chenal, and you've got better run fits. Here's what I'm getting at here, okay? The Bills' yards per carry, all right? When the Chiefs were in base or heavier fronts, basically with Leo Chenal on the field, 3.3 yards per carry. When they were in nickel and it was Trent McDuffie having a run support in there in the slot or even as kind of the third linebacker when he had to move inside in these condensed formations, 5.1 yards per carry. That creates the play action looks you want out of 11. When you get into those 2 tight end sets, then the Bills can start chucking it. Josh Allen 4 for 4 with 17 yards per pass against those heavier packages. I just think Joe Brady, more than anything, even more than, say, the usual physical dominance out of the offensive line that we got last week. And the offensive line was good again in this game. The Bills have one of the best O-lines in the league. But I think Joe Brady did an outstanding job of controlling Steve Spagnuolo's personnel packages, staying ahead of the chain so he couldn't get into all the blitz looks that he can get into on third down, and using just all of the different weapons in their own way that the Bills have, the tight ends, the fullback, all the receivers, the guys willing to get in the box and block and run block and do all those things. That really worked to the Bills' advantage in this game. And I thought maybe it might have been Joe Brady's best called game of the season, even though it was the Bills' usual. It was conservative, but he also picked his spots to be aggressive with the play action. And Josh Allen, 8 for 8 on play action. He just played his role perfectly in this game.
Yeah, this was – I love the way that you put it there, where the Bills were – I don't want to say like one step ahead, but it kind of felt like they were a little bit, right? Like they were ready to be one step ahead of what the Chiefs wanted to do in personnel-wise. And so we know that the Buffalo Bills are at their best when they are really operating out of just heavier personnel, right? It's not even just running the football. When they get the 2 tight end offense moving, even 3 tight ends sometimes with Jackson Hawes in there, that's when this team is really tough to beat, because If James Cook's having a good day, there's a good chance that the Buffalo Bills are going to win that football game just because they're controlling it the way that they want to. Well, if you have heavier personnel on the field for that to try to complement the run game, and yet Dalton Kincaid or Jackson Hawes or Dawson Knox can also be viable receivers in the passing game, again, that's when you become so tough to defend. And I think the first 8 weeks of the season, I wondered if, and I don't really blame Buffalo for this. One, they weren't playing the stiffest of competition. We saw that their schedule was a little bit easier to start the year. But you remember, you go back to training camp in the preseason, how much hype there was for Keon Coleman, right? And how well Keon Coleman was playing and how he was looking like a wide receiver one. Well, now we get into the regular season, and I don't mean for this to be more insulting than it has to be, but we saw the Buffalo Bills cornerbacks, especially without Maxwell Hairston, struggling. And so then you go, oh, okay, well, was Keon Coleman just beating up against Buffalo's bad corners in training camp? Because that might have been the case. In this game, Coleman has 2 targets, 2 catches, 17 yards. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't involve Keon Coleman in the offense. They absolutely should. I think he's a talented wide receiver. But I think they're realizing that sort of the way that you brought this topic up, the most efficient way to run this Buffalo Bills offense is not through Keon Coleman. And I think there were a couple of weeks where they've tried to make that the case, especially on the non-scripted drive. We talked about that over the last couple of weeks. And this was another example of, you look at the great receiving output that they had in this game. Dalton Kincaid, over 100 yards. Khalil Shakir, 8 targets, 7 catches, 43 yards. Dawson Knox had a big 30-yard catch. Elijah Moore even had a big catch. It's the diversity of the offense that really goes to Buffalo's advantage, not trying to run it just through Keon Coleman. So I think there will be a time and a place for Keon Coleman to come up with some big catches for this team down the stretch and into the playoffs of where they want to go. But I think that they are realizing, and to your point about Joe Brady, they're becoming more confident in who they are and how this offense operates best. And I think it is much more from, one, a heavier personnel standpoint, and two, a more diverse passing attack than trying to funnel it through one guy who you want to be your wide receiver one. So I do agree with that, and I think that that's good that you pointed that out. The Chiefs have an early down problem, in my opinion. They don't have a dynamic player out of the backfield to be a running back. I like Brashard Smith a good amount. I know you liked him a lot pre-draft. This was kind of supposed to be the Brashard Smith game, right? No Elijah Pacheco in this one. The last time that they got Brashard Smith fully involved 2 weeks ago, I think he had over 70 combined yards rushing and receiving. He is their most explosive athlete out of the backfield with him and Kareem Hunt, and now they've activated and they're giving carries to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. When you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, they were 2 for 13 on third down in this game. And we'll get to Patrick Mahomes in a second. But just 4 of their third downs out of 13 were less than 7 yards. They're just not. They are trying to make the run game just sort of an extension of the passing game and just to get people off of their back right now. They clearly don't really want to run their offense through whoever is in the backfield. Isaiah Pacheco, Kareem Hunt, Brashard Smith, who I don't feel like got enough looks in this game. 61.8 rushing grade on early downs. They are 25th in the most explosive runs from their running back position this season. And they only have 2 missed tackles forced from their running backs all year on early downs. 2 missed tackles forced. That, as you would expect, is dead last in the NFL. So the Chiefs are not dynamic enough in the backfield on early downs, and they're just not a threat to other teams. And because of that, you get games like the one that we just saw where Patrick Mahomes, 58.7 overall PFF grade, he had a 44% completion percentage in this game. That was the lowest single game completion percentage that he's had in his entire career. And when you go back and you watch the film of Mahomes, he is forcing the ball deep down the field. He did not look decisive. He did not look confident. There are multiple times where I'm watching him throw it deep down the field into double or triple coverage, and there is somebody open right in front of him, and he just didn't want to take it. And at that point, yeah, okay, the Buffalo Bills obviously got a decent lead, but in a couple of those instances, it was like 7-7, 7-13. Like, it's not like the score was way away from them at that point. Mahomes was pressing so hard in this game, pushing the ball deep down the field at a rate that he did not have to do. But I think he felt like he did have to do it because they don't trust how dynamic they are out of the backfield. And that's what I think was the stat that told the story and why the Bills won this game.
Those who for weeks have been clamoring for Kansas City to trade for somebody like Breece Hall, they're winning that argument right now. That's just the fact. Look, Kareem Hunt is not an explosive player anymore. Brashard Smith maybe is in space, but he's not a guy who's built like a between the tackles runner, so that doesn't help you as much on early downs. If you can get him out in space and use the screen game and get him out on outside runs and things of that nature, then he can be solid. But right now this team has a problem where they can't run the football. They're asking Patrick to do too much. You can see it for the season. 15 big-time throws, 13 turnover-worthy plays. You wonder why he's not the highest-graded quarterback in football or even one of the 5 highest-graded right now. It's because he has to use this gunslinger mentality. Some weeks it's working, some weeks it's not. That's why they're 5-4, because they do have flaws in this offense where right now the offensive tackle situation is in flux. Obviously with Josh Simmons' situation, Jawan Taylor has not been great lately. He certainly wasn't very good in this game. They're having a hard time running the football, and you mentioned it, the fact that they don't have anyone to make people miss and to make explosive runs happen. These are the teams that are winning football games right now, the ones that can run the ball, and the Chiefs are not one of them.
Yep. Most impressive for you.
I mean, Dalton Kincaid, right? I mean, you talk about these Bills tight ends, and there's other weeks where we talk about Dawson Knox in the blocking game and Jackson Hawes blocking as a rookie, and he's a perfect fit in this offense too. But to come out here against this team and dominate the middle of the field, win those one-on-one matchups, if you're Dalton Kincaid, 6 catches, 101 yards, a 90 receiving grade. Look, the Bills don't have a number 1 receiver. In these spots, they need somebody to step up for them. Kincaid was the right guy in this game plan, especially when they were attacking the middle of the field, attacking these linebackers, and really getting the Chiefs into the personnel packages that they wanted to. Kincaid was outstanding, a perfect 158.3 passer rating when targeted in this game. This is what he can do in open space, right? And even when they're in 11 and he's that one tight end, you can put him anywhere on the field and it works, right? So I think Dalton Kincaid, obviously, as their best receiver in this game, deserves a lot of credit for what he did.
I'm going to shout out Cole Bishop for what he did in this game. I mean, it felt like
good day for Utah, huh?
He was, yeah, it's very true.
Both of them.
He was all over the field in this one. 41 coverage snaps, that was the most on the team this day. 7 tackles, most on the team. 4 forced incompletions, most on the team. He only allowed 2 catches for 18 yards, and he was covering in all sorts of ways. I mean, they were asking him to fly down in man coverage and cover the flat and those quick out routes. They asked him to play one of the 3 deep rolls in a cover 6, which very clearly they wanted to play cover 6 against Patrick Mahomes in this game. And so it was some form of deep coverage, either cover 6 or 2 deep or whatever it is. And Cole Bishop was a massive part of how flexible they were, because it just felt like he was all over the place. And he was somebody who 2-3 weeks ago, he was struggling this season, and fans were not happy with his performance and just not happy with the safety play in general from the Buffalo Bills. But this was a welcomed sight with him playing as well. Honestly, him and Maxwell Harrison, I think, were huge in this game for Buffalo. And if they're going to get to the AFC Championship game, get to the Super Bowl, win the Super Bowl, their secondary has to play a lot better than it had the first 6-7 weeks of the season. I think these 2 guys playing, at least being capable of playing to this level every week, is going to give them a chance to be able to do that.
At this point, he's played, I believe, 27 snaps last week in his first game, 30 snaps in this game. I think Maxwell Harrison at this point just needs to start. They just need to start him.
Yes.
I know. They've got Tre'Davious White, Jamarcus Ingram, some other guys across from Christian Bedford. Right now, they need to assess these first 2 games and ask themselves, can Maxwell Harrison play 50, 55 plus every week and play something close to this? If he can do that, I think he's got to start right now. He's played an excellent first 2 games in the NFL after recovering from the knee injury. I do think he needs to really be in consideration. And he was always going to be an X factor, right? We talked about it all offseason. They need another corner. They drafted Maxwell Harrison just for this. You really have to think about making him the starter off these 2 performances.
We got some people in the chat talking about Jeremiah Love, the running back from Notre Dame. They're like, imagine him on this Chiefs team.
Yeah.
How much more do you guys want to give the Chiefs?
I mean,
they're already one of the best.
They need a home run hitter, and he's the definition of it. That's for sure.
I mean, with the trade deadline's coming up tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern, I think the 2 that you would be on the lookout for if the Chiefs are going to be targeting any running backs, Breece Hall from your New York Jets, I think that he is somebody who's on the block, and then Chuba Hubbard as well from Carolina. I don't really know if Chuba Hubbard is that on the trade block for this team, because they're 5-4. They're clearly feeling it. They want to finish this year as best they can and go into next year with a lot of momentum. They just signed Chuba Hubbard, so if you trade him, obviously you got to get out of that contract. Rico Dowdle has been the better back for them this season, but do you think that Rico Dowdle is going to be like this for the foreseeable future? Do you think that this is just going to be who Rico Dowdle is from this point in his career on? Because if you do, then I can understand, wanting to move on from Chuba Hubbard. But I also like the idea of this Carolina team just being as diverse as possible on offense. And so I'm not so sure they're going to be that interested in trading him. But if they are, I think the Chiefs are one of those teams that should be called.
We'll say this, too, for the Panthers. They're half a game out of a playoff spot.
I know.
They're 5-4.
I know.
And they're playing the Saints this week. Well, we'll get to the Panthers a little bit later again in that game against the Packers, but you're right. They may not be in a mindset where they're like, why do we have to deal from our depth? And our run game is the best part of our offense now.
Yeah, and they're going to be like, we signed Brees, or we signed Chuba Hubbard to this deal. Like, clearly we think he is worth this contract.
Sure.
So instead, now we just happen to have, because this was always going to be the case, right? Because they signed Chuba Hubbard when they still had Jonathan Brooks coming back from the ACL injury. So it's not like they signed Chuba Hubbard and they thought, oh, he's going to be like the bell cow back like Derrick Henry is or something. They always thought it was going to be a two-back system. It's just not Jonathan Brooks anymore. It's just Rico Dowdle. So I don't know. I'm not convinced that they're trading him, but we'll see. We'll see. We already got Jalen Phillips traded at the deadline, which we'll get into that when we talk about Miami and Philadelphia. But we'll see how active this trade deadline is.